Warning: the five may contain discussions on topics such as death, suicide, rape, addiction, and abuse. Although these topics are approached in a therapeutic manner, they still may have triggering effects on some individuals. Viewer discretion is advised.
Human beings are crafted through experience. Each person, from the closest of friend to the most random of stranger, has a unique story crafted by the ultimate experience that we call life. Welcome to the five. The same five questions, a completely different experience every time.
Today's guest is my very best friend. We're basically inseparable. We love horror movies, we love adventure, we love the outdoors, and we both have a really, really terrible sense of humor. And that's what brought us together, and that's what keeps us best friends to this day. We actually have a podcast together, pretty much all adventures together. And so I'm very excited for you all to meet him today. And so why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello everybody. I'm Jordy. Like Brad said, we do have a podcast together called Beers with Queers. Well, I moved here from West Virginia about 10 years ago. So I am a good old backwoods country boy. And this is the big city for me. So, but yeah, I just love going with the flow, going on hikes, podcasting, movies, all that jazz. So I'm excited. This is my first interview I've ever done, so I'm a little nervous. I don't know how it's gonna go.
Well, most people's probably going to wonder why I didn't interview you first, but in all honesty, you were my very first interview of this podcast and everything like that. But I could definitely tell after interviewing you and knowing you very well that you were holding a lot back. So I think it took a little bit for you to see some of the other podcasts that I've done with other people and how much they opened up before I think you were ready for this. So I'm hoping you're ready for it.
Yeah, that's true. I was the original scapegoat to test out the podcast on. But, there's always that weird fear of going first for anything because you never know how people are going to play it. Like, are they going to, kind of just gloss over it, or are they going to actually, pour their hearts out and, expose their soul for everyone? And so I'm glad it's the second one because I love the fact that people feel that comfortable and safe to share such vulnerable moments. And so that made me, I think, ready to actually open up and do it properly. So I'm ready. I'm ready as I can be.
All right, let's go ahead and kick it off then with what is the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? And I think I know this one, so I'm going to go ahead and throw out a trigger warning. This one probably is going to be very rough to listen to. So trigger warning to everybody because, like I said, I know you, so I know what this story is probably going to be.
And it's funny, too, because most people don't get this vibe from me because, I think most of the answers I'm going to give are going to come out of left field for most people because it's just a different vibe than what I give off. So the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, probably, and like he said, it's going to get dark real quick, it's probably when I watched my aunt get murdered when I was 5. Yeah, 5. And that was by my uncle. And so the whole story behind that is I'm from a very small town in West Virginia, about 400 people, but it's actually, I think, in the top 10 worst drug epidemics in the United States. And so there's a huge drug problem there. I think everyone in my family has battled addiction at some point or another, or currently is. And so there's a lot of issues that come with drug addiction, stuff like that, a lot of violence. And so growing up, when I was for the first 5 years of my life, there was my uncle, and he was married to my aunt, and they had my cousin. And then they were both dealing with drug addiction. And so they started fighting, stuff like that, got ugly, of course. And then my aunt tried to take my cousin away, and she got a restraining order on my uncle and said he couldn't see his son and all that stuff, my cousin. And so, things are getting really heated. And then so one night, I decided to spend the night with my cousin so we could watch movies and stuff at my aunt's house when she was staying at the time. And, it was just a normal night. And so my uncle, we were upstairs in the upstairs bedroom watching movies. And then my uncle came and he was high, drunk, both maybe, I'm not really sure. But he wanted to see my cousin, or he wanted him, and my aunt wasn't letting him see him. So he came to the house and he busted out the bottom window with a wrench. He got in that way and came up the stairs, and my aunt met him in the hallway, and they started arguing and stuff like that, and it got heated, and then she was screaming how she was going to call the cops, and he was never going to see his kid again and all that stuff. And so I guess in like a fit of blind rage, he smacked her across the head with the wrench he was holding, and he thought he killed her, but he actually just knocked her out. And so he went into the bedroom, got me and my cousin, and then brought us downstairs and set us on the couch. And then he went back upstairs, wrapped my aunt in a shower curtain, and then started dragging her down the stairs. But right as he reached the bottom, she kind of woke back up again. And so she started freaking out. She's covered in blood 'cause she has this huge gash on her head. And so my uncle wasn't expecting it. And so he started freaking out. And he grabbed a piece of broken window from where he'd smashed the window out earlier. And he started, and this is really graphic, he started stabbing her in the neck repeatedly with it, like I think it was like 20 to 24 times. And then after that, he pulled out a pocket knife and he sawed away at her neck until he completely decapitated her. And then he threw her head into the kitchen so he wouldn't have to look at it. And the whole time, me and my cousin are sitting there on the couch watching it. And now my uncle's covered in blood. And so he comes over and he grabs both of us in his arms. And now we're covered in blood. And he takes us out to his truck and throws us in and drives us to my dad's house. And my dad and my mom are separated at the time, or they're in the process of getting separated. And I'll talk more about my dad later, but he was kind of like a father figure to my uncle. And then so like my uncle went to him like looking for like what to do now. Like he's like, he messed up and all this stuff. Again, covered in blood. So he's in my dad's house. My dad kind of cleans him up a little. And at first, my uncle wants to flee the state and run away. And so he asked my dad to help him with it. And so my dad's like, like he had, I think he had another kid at that point. And so that's another story. My dad's got like 15 kids. But he had another kid at that point. So he's like, I can't just leave right now. Like it's a newborn. And so they went to my mom to see if they could borrow her car. And so they went to where she was working. She was working a late night shift somewhere. And they like asked her about it and all this stuff. And she's like, no, I can't do that. Like you need to turn yourself in. And so after that, they drove to my grandma's house. And again, me and my cousin are in the car this whole time covered in blood. This is like a 3 or 4 hour ordeal. And so we go to my grandma's house and then my uncle's mom. And so they go in there. He explains what happened, all that stuff. And so like my grandma calls the whole family together. Like my mom leaves work, calls all the uncles, aunts, cousins, all that stuff. And they gather at the house. And then so like he's saying his goodbyes and like he finally decided he's going to like turn himself in and like do the right thing and all this stuff. But before he did, he wanted to say goodbye to everyone in person. And he also wanted my aunt's mom to hear what had happened from him instead of like finding out about it from the police or the news or anything. So he called my aunt's mom and told her what happened. And then after that, he called the cops on himself. And then we all waited in the living room with them until the cops came and arrested him. And he got sentenced. He got found guilty, of course, and he got sentenced to 25 years to life. And so his first parole period's actually coming up, but I highly doubt he's getting out anytime soon. But That's actually, I think, one of the first memories I actually remember from my childhood. It's the most vivid, definitely, by far. And so it's definitely something that sticks with you. And I visited my uncle, I think, 3 or 4 times since then. And I mean, it's weird to think because, now normally he's like a very mild mannered, like very soft spoken man. So to like pair him with what he did is still kind of like jarring to think about. So I don't think about it a lot, but it's still definitely one of the most sad moments, I would say.
I I've heard that story before, so I knew that was probably coming, and I really hate that that ever happened to you. But you are like you're an example of bad things can happen and people still turn out to be an amazing person because you've turned out to be an amazing person in spite of that happening to you and other things and coming from an area that's very impoverished and drug riddled and everything. So I'm very glad that you are where you're at today.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad, and of course, it shouldn't have happened, but it did. And so I've always been a big believer, and you just got to make the best with what you got. And so that's what I've tried to do for the short little while I've been here, all 25 years. So, yeah, just try to live my best life.
Well, I guess we can move on to the next, which is what's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you?
The weirdest thing that's ever happened to me is probably, it wasn't weird to me. I guess it's gonna be weird to other people that didn't grow up around it. I was a drug mule when I was still in diapers growing up, and so like I said before, I grew from a very impoverished, drug addicted area in the mountains. And so there was only one real way to make good money in that area. And that was, of course, making, selling, and distributing drugs. And my dad was very big into that. He's not anymore, but he was very big into that. And he was like one of the biggest, like, drug lords in the tri state area. And so at the time when my mom and my dad were still together, my mom was trying to make an honest living. And she was like going to school and working the night shift and stuff like that. And then so I just got left alone with my dad most of the time. And so my dad had to, you know, keep business going, get money in the house because we grew up in like a single wide rat roach infested trailer. There was sometimes we didn't have any food and anything like that. And so he did what he had to do. But that would include, he would go all over the place, all over the county, selling and buying up drugs to sell. But I mean, he had me, so he had to take me with him. And so, I was still in diapers at the time, and I used to love it. Back then I was like, it's just a day out with dad, and we would like stop and get ice cream and stuff like that. And then like he would take me in with all the people he was dealing drugs with, and they were all super nice. They were always nice to me. They always hung out with me, made me laugh and stuff like that. So I was always excited. But then afterwards, he would always give me like a Frosty from Wendy's for helping him out. So because what they would do, because he had a rap sheet as long as the state of Tennessee, and so of course cops are going to be on the lookout for him. Like I said, it's a small town. And so a lot of the times he would like stuff the drugs in my diaper and he would say, put him in his diaper because if they ask to search him, we can get him in trouble for trying to touch little kids. And that was his thing to get them, his way of getting one over on the cops. And so I was just riding along in the car in my diaper with drugs tucked in the side, the waistband. But like I said, at the time, I didn't think anything. I was like, yeah, this is a fun day with dad. And now looking back on it, I realize it's very messed up and stuff like that. But it's very weird to say that, yeah, before I was potty trained, I was a pretty prolific drug mule
Who is paid with Frosties?
who was paid with Frosties. And like I said, after the end of every day, my dad would pull up through Wendy's and goes, "What kind of Frosty you want, baby?" And I'd get my frosty, come home. When mom got home, she's like, "How was your day?" I was like, "It was amazing." And then by that time, my dad usually had money from selling the drugs, so we'd have a nice dinner and stuff like that. So honestly, those are some of my fondest memories.
And the funny thing is, I've met your dad, and he is really, really cool. Like, he's just a really sweet, really nice guy. Like, I mean, I know he's done some bad things in his past and everything like that, but he is a changed man. But he's just a really, really nice, cool, very open-minded guy. So I guess everybody can change a little bit for the better.
A little.
A little.
He's good at heart. It's just growing up there, it really is like a survival thing. You gotta do what you gotta do to survive. It's very easy to say, like you can just leave, but unless you're actually growing up there, it's very hard to actually leave. Like I'm the only person in my family who has left, and so it's harder than it looks to like break that cycle of, I guess, generational poverty and stuff like that. So just doing our best.
All right. I guess we can move on to the next one, which is, what's the most memorable moment of your life so far?
This one's easy, and this one's more happy. Probably just a few years ago, and like, was it 2018? Yeah, it was 2018. So we go to Dragon Con every year, and so like one of the biggest nerd conventions in America and the world, honestly, and by pure happenstance, like the universe is just aligned. That was the year that we just happened to meet like a dozen of our closest friends now. And so, I mean, I still remember vividly, like we were like up in our room. It was like noon on Thursday, I think, because that's when the con doesn't really start, but we get there early to get everything situated. And so we're like, oh, we got time to kill. Nothing's really going on. What we want to do? And we were like, well, we can go like chill down at the hot tub for a little bit, just relax because we're going to be doing a lot of walking. And so I was like, okay. And we would go down there, and then at first we're swimming because we go in there and there's like the hot tub's filled to the brim with people. And so we're like, oh, it's full. Well, we can swim around and wait for him to clear out a little bit. So we swam a little bit, kept looking over every once in a while. I was like, well, they're not leaving at all. So finally, it's like, it's Dragon Con. We can make new friends. They can scoot over. And so we just get out, go over there, start making chit chat with them. And, it's the same like questions you usually ask when you meet someone new, like, oh, what do you do? Where are you from? And we were like, oh, we're from, Knoxville, Tennessee. And they're like, we're from Knoxville, Tennessee. And so and this is in Atlanta. So it's like 3 hours away. But it's just that pure coincidence, like both of our groups met up at the same time, just happened to be there at the same time, 3 miles away from where we all live. And then so like afterwards, like we hung out more with them that con than the actual people we came there with. And so when we finally got back to Knoxville, it's like, well, let's meet up now. We got all these friends all of a sudden. And I literally, since 2018, we have not went longer than a week without seeing at least one member of that group or hanging out with them. And so we have movie nights, parties, slumber parties. We go on vacations together and stuff like that. And so it's just still crazy to me how this one circumstance like changed everything. Because, like, well, what if we decided to go to the hot tub an hour earlier or an hour later and stuff like that. So it's really one of those things I feel like where it's like the universe knows when you need something, and so it put that out there for us. And oh no, very memorable. I still think about it every once in a while. I'm like, that's so crazy, like how different my life would be, your life would be, all of our lives would be if that one little coincidence didn't happen. So I think that's probably the most memorable so far.
I call it the Great Hot Tub Incident, because it's like all of the stories of our group starts with this hot tub and us all meeting there and everything. And it is one of those things that I think about because I love to think about the very small decisions that completely change your life forever, 100% change your life. Like, it's like you said, we literally could have decided not to go over to the hot tub or do something else or go grab lunch and then come back, and our lives would not be the same as they are right now. So it's one of those things I always tell people. I'm like, there's a lot of times where you'll be invited to something and you're just like, I don't really feel it. I don't know. It's just a birthday party, or it's just going for a couple of drinks or something like that. But, I always try to look at those as like opportunities that may end up changing your life, because normally it's the small things in life, the small experiences that send your life on a different path. Like, you can go on these massive, really fun vacations and trips and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, wow, it's life changing. And in a way, it is, because, it opens your mind and all that. But then, crazy enough, it's usually the small encounters that literally change your life's path. And so I'm always look at those and I'm like, it would be really easy for me to just be like, I don't feel it, I'm going to stay at home tonight. But then I'm like, you know what? I may be missing out on something that's really going to make my life better. Or, maybe literally make your life worse. But most of the times I've found that putting yourself out there leads to better experiences in life.
Well, that's the thing too, is like it may make your life worse. Like some situations might make your life worse. But then also it's like, you know, if that happens, if it didn't happen sometimes, maybe you wouldn't be the person you are today and stuff like that. So like every once in a while I'll think like, well, yeah, like, it sucks that like I had such a like rough start in life and such a rough upbringing. But at the same time, it's like, but if I could go back and change it, honestly, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be where I am now. And I love where I am now. And, I wouldn't be the same person that I am. And so it's one of those things where like it's sad that it happened, but it happened. And now we just gotta take it and mold it into what our life is and continues to be. And so, but this was one of those experiences that was just came at the right time. It was the perfect moment, perfect storm of circumstances and stuff like that. And so it makes me happy and smile every time I think about it.
Well, I'm about to ruin that, I'm afraid, with the next question, which is, what's the saddest thing that ever happened to you?
Well, it's a couple things. Really, the sense of abandonment I really felt growing up when I did. And that part, it's like, when I was growing up, which to preface this, my mother is fantastic now. I love my mother. But, growing up, my dad had me when he was 15 going on 16. And I think my mom was only about 17 or 18 when they had me. So they were still kids themselves. And to preface that, my dad had 4 kids by the time he turned 16. So he started young. But it was just a really weird situation, circumstances, stuff like that. And so when they were raising me, they were kind of raising themselves too. And sometimes that didn't always result in the best choices and circumstances and stuff like that. And so there'd be a lot of times I remember growing up when they would like, fight and stuff like that. And when you're like around that age, like early 20s and stuff, sometimes, you're like, well, if we're fighting, I have to go make this person jealous or something like that. So they'll come crawling back to me. And that's really what they would do a lot of times. And so like my dad would go out to the bars to make my mom jealous. My mom would go out to the bars to make my dad jealous. And then, these fights were spontaneous. It's not like they planned them. And so that kind of just left me out of the mix. And then sometimes they would find people, but it would often not be anyone like they knew. It'd just be like going around like the trailer park and knocking on random people's doors, being like, hey, can you watch him for like a couple of hours or till morning or whatever? And, that didn't always result in the best situations. And so, some stuff happened, stuff like that. And that was very traumatic. And that really left a sense of feeling like unwanted and abandoned and stuff like that. Or then sometimes, like if they couldn't find someone, they would just both like leave me in the house. And this is when I was like 4 or 5. And so I remember a lot of times like that, like being scared and stuff like that, alone in the house. And then it was one of those things where it's like they'd come back a few hours later and we just act like nothing happened, just move on. And so, but my brain was always like, but it did happen. Like, we're not going to talk about it. And it's like, no, we don't talk about it. And that's well, my whole family's like that. We don't really talk about things or situations or anything like that. And so it's something that has always really bothered me, and it leaves a lot of unresolved like issues and traumas or situations where it's like, well, I want to talk about it, but then, it's like, well, we don't want to talk about it. And so it just, it's frustrating and stuff like that. And then I think the other part is, I guess, realizing that I would never have like the ideal family situation or like a father who would actually be a father. And so like I should like say that like my dad, like I said, he was like 15 going on 16, and he means well, but like I don't think has the proper knowledge to actually be a dad. Like I said, he has 14 confirmed kids that he knows of. And so he's never really been like a dad. Like he's not one that's like make rules or anything like that. He's more of like the buddy you go out, you drink with or smoke with and stuff like that. Like, I mean, there was one time when I was growing up, my dad like handed me a beer and told me to chug it. And then when I chugged it and threw up, that was just like one of those funny things. He's like, oh, I bet you won't do that again. And that was his way of like bonding, like joking around and stuff like that. Cause that's all he really knew growing up. And it's just one of those things like over the years, like on and off my relationship with my dad. So it'll be like, we'll talk to be good for like a year or two, and then we'll go 5, 6 years without ever speaking a word to each other. And there's always been that part of me in the background. It's like, oh, I've always wanted that. And that's been like that since I was like 5. But it's always been a part of me that's wanted that father figure, that father experience and stuff like that. Um, just growing up, or just like a normal like mom and dad situation. And so it's always weird to me to like hear people when they're like, yeah, my parents are still together. They're celebrating 30 years of marriage. It's like my parents didn't last 5. And like it's such a odd and foreign concept to me to think that there's people out there that whose parents are still together. And that's something I always wondered about, like what if they were still together and we had that like nuclear family type situation. And even like I know like that's not the end of the world. All kinds of people have divorced parents, but it's also that situation where it's like over the years I have tried to build a bond with my dad, but it's not one of those things like a dad situation. I don't know how to explain where like he's like, well, this is my kid. Like I'm gonna go out of my way to like talk and like try to make plans to hang out. It really is just like that frat friend from college where it's like we should hang out sometime. And then he's like, yeah, man, we'll hang out like whenever we'll find a free moment, we'll hang out. But there's no like sense of urgency or anything like that. And so it's just one of those like for the longest time, it's like, well, like what's wrong with me? Why am I not wanted? And because like I said, 14 kids, I think out of all of them, I'm the only one that's been to college. Uh, Besides like the younger half, all the older ones have been addicted to drugs and in jail at some point, except me. And so it's always I've always been one of those kids to like strive for like perfection, especially from where I grew up and stuff like that. Is like, I want to like prove all the statistics wrong. Like all the statistics point to me being like becoming like a Walter White character of the South. And so I want to do my best to beat him. And I think I'm doing a good job, but at the same, it's just like there's no, I don't know, sense of success or reward because it's just kind of like, good job, buddy. And so I'm like, yeah, I guess. And so it took me a long while, but I finally accepted it. Where like I don't see my father as my father, um, even though I look just like him, a spitting image of him. I see him more as a friend that I hang out with from time to time. And so like when he's in town and stuff, I'm like, oh, let's get dinner or something like that. And so we never talk about like father-son things or anything like that. Like we just, shoot the shit like two buds over beers that haven't seen each other in a couple years or something. And then like at the end of the night, it's just a see you, man. See you next time whenever we get a free chance. And then he goes on his way, I go on mine. And so it took a long time to accept like, I'm never gonna have like a normal relationship with him. And it's a weird thing too because it's not like he's like unaccepting of me or anything. He's like extremely accepting and loving and stuff like that. Like he's that like overly affectionate friend. He's like, I love you, buddy. I love all you. I love you. This and that and that. He's super chill, loving and stuff like that. But it's just not a fatherly kind of love. It's more of just like a bro, like bromance type of love and stuff like that. And so it took me a long while to accept, but I think I finally accepted it. But at the same time, every now and then I'll think about it and I'm like, I wish it was different, but what are you gonna do?
I think you've turned out as a wonderful person despite, your upbringing and everything like that. And yeah, I've met your dad. He's a character. Like tons of funny stories, tons of funny things he's done. Most of them not very kid friendly at all. Uh, so, he is kind of like a wild card. Like he is the crazy sitcom character that comes in like 3 times a season and everybody just absolutely loves him because he's hilarious and he's one of the best parts of the season, but then he's gone, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the best way I can think of him and everything. Like I will literally sit and listen to the man for like hours and just really enjoy it and everything. But at the same time, I'm like, I could never. I'm like, I couldn't picture this being my dad because I did have the perfect dad, and the perfect family upbringing that, the fairy tale storybook family upbringing and everything and father. So to me, it's like I look at it and I'm like, I just can't believe it. It just seems so odd to me.
Yeah, and like I said, growing up, there's all kinds of stories and stuff like that. Like he like almost killed me in a meth lab fire when I was like 6 because I was out there playing with his buddies while they're making stuff. He's crashed like 3 cars with me in it from falling asleep and stuff like that. He's almost burnt the house down twice. He almost killed me. He gave me food poisoning once because he cooked like 3-week-old steaks. Um, but it's just one of those things. I think he tried with what he had, and I mean that's not an excuse and stuff like that. But like the area we grew up in, there was not that good of education and stuff like that, and so I don't blame him necessarily. I blame the environment that turned him into what he is. Um, he is quite a character, and he's a fun guy to like hang out with and party with. He's like your party friend that like has all these cool like party stories and stuff from growing up. But it's just weird, like these like this is the person that's supposed to be like my father figure. Like I feel like he's younger than I am, honestly, because he's still living out his party days. And so it's that weird thing where it's like this man like used to change my diaper and feed me a bottle, and we're here just like talking like two bros, and it's like, yeah, I mean, like you've helped raise me partially, and so it's weird to like there's not that bondness or closeness that you would think would come from that. And so it's a weird situation, but it is what it is.
I guess all of this leads into this final question, which is based on your life experience, what's the best advice you can give the people out there listening?
One, don't let your past define you, and don't let the hardships and struggles and stuff like that you faced get to you. And so I think it's very easy, like, all of us have suffered some sort of hardship or traumatic event growing up, and it's very sad. And a lot of the times, like, there was no resolution to it or proper resolution to it. And so I think it's really important to not let that define you or who you are. And so that's kind of like what I have to do. I'm like, like no one would fault me for feeling sorry for myself or like doing something like that. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't want that part of me to define who I am. It was a part of me. It happened. That's a part of my story now. But I I want to grow from it and live the life that I want to live. Like I didn't get to choose how I was raised or grew up the first 12, 18 years of my life. But now, like, I'm old enough, I can use the things I learned, both good and bad, from how I grew up to figure out how I want to shape my life and what direction I want my life to go in. And so, like, that was one of the things, like, growing up like that, like, it was a life and death situation for, like, the first 12 years. And so, like, by the time I was 18, like, I already, like, knew what I wanted to do. I was already really, like, self-assured in what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be in life. I didn't really have, like, like, a phase, like a party phase or anything where it's, like, living out my, like, youth and stuff like that. Like, I had the spirit of, like, a 40-year-old man by the time I was, like, 17. And so I was like, I have, like, done enough living. I want to rest now. And so it's just one of those things. I think don't let your hardships define who you are. You define who you are. And don't let anyone tell you differently or say you can't do something, or don't think that the environment you come from prevents you from doing anything you want. So like I said, that's like where I'm from, like there's like a graduation rate of like less than 20%. And so it's when I say like millions of people like all over the world like expected me and everyone else to fail. And that's the thing too. No one would blame us if we did fail, because it's like, of course you would in that circumstance or that environment. And so, but at the same time, it's like, that's not what I wanted. And like, I'm not going to let that pre-expectations or pre-notions people have of where I should end up define what I want to do. And so, I mean, I grew up that all the time, like I want to make like movies, like Hollywood movies and stuff like that. And I've said that since I was like 5, because that's another thing too. Like movies for me have always been an escape. When I was little, like all those traumatic things would happen and stuff like that. Like the way I coped with it was watching movies and stuff like that. And so, like, since I was little, I was like, I want to make movies and do the same thing for other people. And of course, I heard all the time, it was like, you are poorer than poor in a rat infested trailer. Your dad's a drug lord and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't see you coming anywhere close to getting out of this. And so I'm not like a big time director or anything yet, but I have worked my way into a good, comfortable life, and I'm still working away at it and slowly working towards my goals and stuff like that. So it's not a race, it's a sprint. Wait, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I think that's how the saying goes. And so, don't feel like you have to compare yourself to other people. Don't feel like your life has to be at a certain thing by a certain age and stuff like that. Just take your time, breathe, work towards what you want to work towards that makes you happy. Don't let anything distract you or anyone tell you otherwise. And just try to enjoy life. That's another thing too. Growing up like that, like I learned to like really appreciate life and the small things, stuff like that. And so like never be afraid to be goofy or silly in public or embarrassed. Like, if do something that's fun or outrageous that makes you happy, and just enjoy doing it. Love life as best you can.
Another thing I said that you're really good at is you surround yourself with really good people and people that help you shoot for your dreams, and people who like support you in the endeavors that you choose. So I think that's another really big quality that maybe you don't say that's like the best advice, but it's one of the things that I've seen you actually present just by what you do with your life.
The company you keep is very important. So always be sure to surround yourself with people that are supportive and loving unconditionally and have similar goals to you. They don't have to have similar goals to you. Like they're just working on their own thing, but at the same time, you both like support each other when you need it, or just a shoulder to lean on or cry on or anything you need like that. And so I do feel very fortunate to have like a huge network of people like that. And I know, but you don't even have to have a huge network. If you can just find one person that you can count on and believe in you, even if that person is yourself. So like, don't feel like you have to have someone else to like assure you or lean on. As long as you believe in you and you know like you're capable of doing what you want to do, that's all you need.
I have to say, I really, really enjoyed doing this today. You're my favorite person in the world, just as far as, couldn't get a better best friend, wingman, everything like that. All the adventures that we've had, all the wonderful things that you've caused in my life. I just got to say thank you for them. And I think you're an amazing person despite everything that you went through growing up. Like, I don't think it could have, sometimes it takes a lot of pressure to make a diamond.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. But no, thank you. This was fun. I enjoyed doing it. It's cheaper than therapy, so I love it.
It is cheaper than therapy. I've literally heard that from a lot of my guests that are like, I come on here and I was gonna like maybe say a couple of things, and the next thing I know, I was like pouring my heart out. And I really appreciate the people that have, and I really appreciate that this time you were able to really open up and share the real you.
Well, hopefully it helps somebody, or hopefully people are just enjoy hearing it, because I don't talk about it a lot. I don't talk about it often, and so I don't think, honestly, I don't think anyone besides like you knows, except now. So,
And that is the ultimate goal of this whole podcast, is just to let people know that, there's so many different ways of growing up. There's no wrong way. You're not alone in all of this. And, almost no matter what you go through, there's somebody out there that's went through it, or is going through it right now, and they could use your story. So thank you for sharing that.
thank you for having me.
I want to thank you all for listening today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Also, check out the video podcast at Handlebar ASMR on YouTube for extras.